Alright, it's time to talk about MLB attendance again. I did a video on this topic about a year ago, easily the most negative video I've ever made. I talked about how MLB attendance has declined almost every year since 2008, and at times it sounded pretty hopeless. Sadly, that was one of my most viewed videos ever. People love negativity. 1 year later, people are still watching it and commenting on it like it was just uploaded last week. Well, if negativity drives views, then this one is going to disappoint, because Major League attendance is way up, more than any of us expected it would be. I know the season is far from over, but we are now 2 months in. Over a third of the schedule has been played, and as of Wednesday, May 31st, MLB attendance is up nearly 2,000 fans per game, from 24,905 per game at this point of the season in 2022 to 26,753 per game in 2023. Only 8 teams are seeing a decline, and most of those teams are under 500 right now, so their attendance decline is pretty easy to explain. The present attendance average is higher than the attendance at the end of the season in 2018 and 2019, and we're just now entering the summer months, when attendance always reaches its highest points. The team that was the biggest drag on attendance last year is once again by far the worst in attendance this year. Despite the Oakland A's putting up historically bad attendance figures once again, the league as a whole is seeing a huge increase in ticket sales. And we now know that the A's problem is going to be fixed. One of the points I made in last year's video was that MLB attendance might not look so bad if the A's were at least drawing 5-figure attendance. But Oakland fans were staying away because of the uncertainty of not knowing whether the team was going to remain or not. Now we know, and it's not good news for fans in Oakland, but we can now look forward to the team drawing larger crowds when they do move to Vegas, something that'll help bring the league average up when they finally move. And despite the decision, the A's have seen an increase in attendance this year, almost 1,000 per game. Still really bad, but not as bad. There were a lot of different reasons I gave in last year's video for the decline, and more reasons were mentioned in the comments. Attendance had been trending downward for 14 years. We had time to see how things had changed over the years. A lot has changed since 2008, and a lot of the trends were not going in MLB's favor. Some things seemed like they couldn't be fixed. Kind of hopeless, really. Well, now we're seeing a sudden reversal of that decline. Many possible reasons why that's happened. It may be just one or two of them causing the spike in attendance, or it may be all of them contributing to it. As always, if you've got your own theory on it, leave a comment. The biggest change that occurred prior to this season was the implementation of certain rules to speed up the game, particularly the pitch clock. The changes haven't always gone smoothly. Players, coaches, and umpires are still getting adjusted to it. But overall, the fans have embraced it. Average game times had been going up almost every single year. This year, they have fallen dramatically. Games are, on average, about a half hour shorter. Is that the reason for MLB's surge in attendance? After all, game times had been increasing, and attendance was decreasing proportionately year after year. Then they both reversed at the same time. Seems like more than just a coincidence. And many have concluded that the reduction in game time is the sole reason for fans returning to the ballpark. Is it though? Do people really go to a game hoping it will end as quickly as possible? I can't speak for every fan, but when I go to a game, I don't mind if it takes a while. I spent good money on tickets. I want to get the most out of it. If 2.5 hours are all I've got to spare, then I can always leave the game early. So I can't imagine people buying tickets and attending a game because the games are shorter now. There's more action, sure. Shorter time between pitches, more base stealing now too. But the time between pitches was more of an annoyance when watching it on TV. When you're at the park, it's not such a problem. You're getting the ballpark experience. You can see, hear, and feel everything around you. The positive effect of shorter game times will be seen in the TV ratings, and ratings are up so far. A very good sign for Major League Baseball. The expectation was that ratings would go up first, and it eventually leads to more people willing to buy tickets and attend games. I'm just not buying it that people heard about the rule changes and decided to head out to the ballpark right away. Doesn't seem right, but I could be wrong about that. One thing that really dragged down attendance early last season was the MLB lockout. The season started later than originally planned. No one could buy tickets because we didn't know if there was even going to be a season. People made other plans for April, and first month attendance was really bad. The lockout had some effect on attendance later in the year as well. Some people planned their trips to the ballpark months in advance. The uncertainty in March probably caused some people to give up on it completely. Does this mean that the increase in attendance is on a 1-year delay? That we would have seen this last year if they had just ended the lockout earlier? Maybe in 2022 people were so ready to get back to the ballpark after 2 years of COVID restrictions, and the lockout put off those plans for another year. Maybe. But I think the lockout mostly just affected first month attendance last year. This year, attendance was up in the first month and continued to crush last year's attendance figures in the second month. So last year's lockout and this year's absence of one probably contributed to it, but it wasn't the main reason. Cost is perhaps the biggest complaint among baseball fans, and many state that as their reason for not going to games anymore, especially with rising inflation the last couple years. If they were to reduce the price of tickets and concessions, attendance would certainly be higher. Not sure if the rise in attendance would offset the loss of profits from the price reduction, but there would be more fans in attendance for sure. And now, inflation is still higher than the increase in wages. The cost of tickets is still high, yet somehow more people are paying money to go catch a game. The problem didn't go away, it didn't get any better. It's just that more people are willing to overlook it. They seem to think the cost is worth it now, which is great news for owners. Bad news for those of us who love baseball but don't have much to spend. One frequent comment on last year's video can be summed up in 4 words: get woke, go broke. And I explained in that video that MLB's attendance issues go back 15 years, before anyone even knew what woke meant. And about 7 or 8 years ago, when things like the national anthem protest started, it was hardly seen at all in Major League Baseball. Yet attendance continued to decline during that time. The big one was moving the All-Star game out of Atlanta because of the voting law in Georgia. That was a controversial move, and it's hard to gauge what effect it had on attendance because, in 2021, things were not back to normal yet. When comparing year-over-year attendance, 2020 and 2021 are not even looked at, since at that time normal attendance figures couldn't possibly be reached. Maybe the moving of the All-Star game in 2021 was still fresh in people's minds in 2022, and they avoided the ballparks for that reason. And it's been a couple of years, they've made their point, and are willing to give MLB another chance. That's possible. We saw the NFL lose a number of fans, temporarily, and now it's thriving again. Fans tend to forgive and forget after a while, but politics doesn't explain the long attendance decline year after year, starting when MLB was mostly apolitical. And besides, boycotting fans tend to slowly return to the games, not suddenly all at one time, as if there's an expiration date to their frustrations. The one instance where a political decision did for sure have a negative effect on attendance was in Cleveland. Attendance hasn't always been so good there in recent decades, but when the Indians were good, fans showed up in large numbers. Last year, the first year of the new name, they had a great team, but for the first time, the size of the crowd did not match the winning product on the field. And like I said in last year's video, their reason for not going may not even be political. It's more a case of brand loyalty. If you spent your whole life rooting for the Indians, and one day they're not the Indians anymore, it might be hard to convince you to start rooting for a team with a different name and different logo. When you're young, you most likely start cheering for the teams in your area. When you get older, you're less likely to adopt a new team, even if it's in your local area, even if it's the same team rebranded. It was probably easier for a lot of fans in the area to just stop watching baseball, especially if baseball is not their favorite sport. Attendance is up in Cleveland this year. They should be able to eventually replace the lost Indians fans with new, younger Guardians fans, but it's going to take some time, and some memorable seasons from their rebranded ball club. COVID was mentioned by a few, and some sports writers have given that as a reason. I don't know how many people were still worried about COVID in 2022, and then got over their concerns in the past year. Judging by the attendance in other sports, it seems that some, but not too many, were still avoiding large crowds last year, but not this year. It wouldn't explain the large increase we're seeing in Major League Baseball. The WBC took place right before the season began, the biggest WBC ever. The championship game was watched by 4.5 million viewers in the US, and that took place just before the season began. Maybe the excitement of that event, instead of the usual spring training, got people excited about the Major League season. It would explain why so many more fans headed out to the ballparks right at the beginning of the season. That may just be wishful thinking on my part. International baseball is what I live for. It's in the name of the channel. I don't know how much the average sports fan cared for this year's WBC. I also couldn't tell you if the 4.5 million who watched the WBC final carried that enthusiasm into the Major League season. So this year we've got no MLB lockout, less concern over COVID, and maybe some people are putting the politics of the past behind them. But those factors would only explain the rise in attendance if it was returning to 2019 numbers. It's on track to surpass the 2019 and 2018 figures, and be the highest since 2017. The one big difference between this year and any other year is the rule changes. Like I said before, I've never gone to a game hoping it'll be over and done with as soon as possible. I've never complained when I'm at the ballpark and it lasts over 3 hours. The time it took between pitches was annoying when watching on TV, but it never bothered me when I was there in the bleachers. But that's just me. Maybe I'm not the average fan like I thought. It seems to be the most logical explanation. They changed the rules and suddenly people are coming back in large numbers. That can't be just a coincidence. Other factors could have had an effect too, but not to this extent. Let me know what you think in the comments. Did the rule changes make you want to overlook the rising cost of tickets and get back out to the ballpark after an absence of several years? Or is there some other reason that the rest of us just aren't seeing? Let us know in the comments. Anyway, that's all for this one. Until next time, this is Baseball International. See ya.